Alrighty, so today I am going to talk about the two teams that currently still have not registered a single point this season, and those two teams are the San Jose Earthquakes and the New England Revolution, and respectively, both of them are at the bottom of the standings to begin the season. Now, obviously, I think when you look at these two teams, I think it's a little bit more surprising that New England is currently at the bottom of the Eastern Conference with no points compared to the Quakes because, well, I know that I've said before I have expectation the Quakes can make the next step after making the playoffs last season. If you go back to the narrative that the Quakes have always have whenever they made it to the playoffs or at least barely made it to the playoffs, very next year they basically fall apart and finish dead last in the standings. And it feels like it's happening again. We saw it back in 2021 when they made it to the playoffs, and then in 2022 it was an absolute disaster. And we saw it in 2017 too when they made it to the playoffs. And then the very next year, yeah, I don't want to kind of talk about what happened in 2018 as that was easily the worst year that the Quakes have ever had in franchise history. But you know, a lot of people were expecting New England to be better, and I get yes, they have the Concacaf Champions Cup to endure, and that we have seen before when teams that were playing in that competition and also balancing MLS play it's almost impossible because of the restrictive roster rule. But even then, I did not expect New England to get off to just such a slow start, and especially under a new boss, Caleb Porter. You know, I was expecting maybe that new head coach boost would come for this Revs team, and it definitely has helped in terms of the CONCACAF Champions Cup play. I mean, they have been world beater in that competition, but for whatever reason, it just hasn't really translated into league play. Now, first look at the San Jose Earthquakes, and in terms of their miserable start, so they're 0-4 and have scored 3 goals so far this season while giving up 9 goals with a -6 goal differential. That actually is not the worst defensive record in the league, as I'll talk about in just a bit. It's actually New England, the one that currently owns the worst defensive record in the league. But in the beginning of the season, they lost 2-1 against FC Dallas, and mind you, they had a lead in that game. In fact, both of the games that the Quakes have play on the road, they had the lead first, and had the lead early in the game, only to basically throw it away. And in some way, that first game is almost kind of a carbon copy of the opening game against Atlanta last season when they had the lead early in the game and couldn't quite hold on. Though, unlike the Atlanta game where they gave up 2 late goals to lose that one, they gave up a equalizer, I think, around the 35th minute mark, and then eventually did lose by giving up another goal in stoppage time on opening day. But also it was a matchup that, yeah, you know, Dallas, they were well deserved the 3 points. They were by far the better team. The Quakes were pretty much just hanging on for dear life. As what I have my criticism in terms of Lucci Ball and the fact that, yeah, you know, this is starting to be very familiar of Dominic Kinnear kind of vibes of the way that the Quakes are just kind of scoring first, and then they just hold on for dear life and hope that they can salvage a win or even a draw out on the road. And then the very next game where they play against the Galaxy in the home opener, well, I went to that game and let's just say that that was by far the worst performance that the Quakes have put this season. I mean, it was pretty sad to see how the Quakes not only have a home opener and have a big crowd, and they just completely look flat. Like they look completely disinterested in their home opener, and next thing you know, they found themselves 3-0 down at home and only got a consolation goal at the end. Now, that's at least a little better in terms of the next game where they actually lost to the Vancouver Whitecaps, and that was also another game where I will say that you know, the offense, of course, just didn't get going whatsoever. And it's not a big surprise. The offense has been struggling for the Quakes. This was a known problem last season too under Luchi Gonzalez. I mean, this team has scored some of the least amount of goal in the league, but the only reason why they were still able to make the playoffs is because, you know, the defense, at least, you know, the back line wasn't good, but they had a world beater goalkeeper in Danielle that was just pretty much stealing games. That hasn't happened this year. I mean, Danielle has had a huge regression this year, and it's no surprise that when he has a regression and the backline hasn't been great whatsoever, and also the offense and the attack are being so one dimensional throughout this season and look very sluggish. That's why they're in the position that they currently are. And then in the very next game against Sporting KC, as I mentioned, this was probably the best game that the Quakes, of course, have played. And I know that sounds like sugarcoating, but the Quakes were the better team against Sporting KC for most part of this one, but they just aren't able to get the result. I mean, oh, they were a handball that was disallowed to go away from being getting their first point of the season against Sporting KC, but nevertheless, just like the Dallas game, they went up early, only to give up two goals very in a very quick succession. And again, they played well for the rest of the way. They just could not solve Melia and just could not catch a break in terms of having a goal disallowed because of a handball. Now, looking at the New England Revolution and their stars. So again, New England, I know that there is that kind of excuse of the fact that they have playing CONCACAF Champions Cup, and it's tough to balance both competition at the same time. But it's not like New England have some teams that are really tough in the competition, and that this is where I'm kind of surprised that Caleb Porter hasn't been rotating his roster as much as what we see with other teams in MLS entering the early rounds of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They maybe rotate their squad because they're facing against minnows in Central America or in the Caribbean region. But nevertheless, just like the Quakes, they've only scored 3 goals this season while allowing 10 goals and have a -7 goal differential in their season opener against DC United. They actually lost that one. I actually wrote the wrong score in terms of that. It's actually 3-1 in favor of DC. I just realized that. I'm pretty sure everybody realized that when the video began. I mean, obviously New England hasn't have a point. There's so far there's a reason why I'm making this video about them as well. But yeah, they lost 3-1 in that one. They also had a sending off there from Giacomo Veroni, which was probably the worst possible outcome for a guy that's supposed to have a breakout season, and you get yourself sent off literally just 25 minutes into the game and lose 3-1 in that. And also, not to mention, they also gave up a hat trick to Christian Benteke in that game as well. But I will say that at least in that game, as much as bad as the scoreline is, they did show some resiliency of able to tie the game up and at least play well when they were down to 10 men until Christian Benteke basically showed up. And then the very next game, this was probably one of their worst game with them losing 1-0 at home to Toronto FC. And mind you, this was supposed to be a team that is supposed to be finished at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, as everybody predicted, and a team that's supposed to win the wooden spoon, or at least favorite of winning the wooden spoon this year because of the rebuild. But obviously that hasn't happened. Toronto has actually been getting off to a decent start this year, and they lost that 1-1-0. And then they had their worst loss the very next game by losing 4-1 against Atlanta. Though I will say that game was kind of a little bit misleading, and this is where the CONCACAF Champions Cup kind of fatigue started to get to New England, where I thought in the first half New England actually looked good in the first half. I thought they were going toe to toe with Atlanta United. But they just ran out of gas in the second half, and it's shown because in the second half it was all Atlanta. They just steamrolled the Revs, and next thing you know, the Revs found themselves 4-0 down in the game. And then in the following matchup against FC Cincinnati, again, this was not a bad game for New England. They played well in this game against FC Cincinnati. Just couldn't solve Roman Salatano, and also not to mention gave up those 2 goals in quick succession. Like anytime when you give up 2 goals in quick succession, it's always very tough to try to overcome, and they end up losing 2-1 in that game. But at least Veroni scored in that game, and it seems like maybe he's starting to get himself going in terms of the goal scoring department. Now, looking at the next 5 games for both of these teams for the Quakes, also looking at these next 5 games and kind of just tell you guys where each of these teams can finally get their first points or even get their first win of the season. Well, for the Quakes, there is a possibility they could get their first point and even maybe their first win in the next game as well, because they're playing against the Seattle Sounders, and the Sounders, they're another team that has just got off to a terrible start to the season, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're probably the most injured to hell team in the league, and they just have no depth in terms of coverage for those injuries. So you got to say that has to be a game that the Quakes should get something, especially against a Sounders team that also have been having problem in terms of scoring too. They have not scored an open play goal in 420 minutes. Nice. But yeah, that's got to be one that they have to do, especially at home too. Like they should not be keep losing home home games, considered that was supposed to be one of their strengths last season under Luchi Gonzalez. Now, the very next game, I don't think this is going to be a win, though, because they have to go on the road against the Houston Dynamo. It is very rare the Quakes have been able to beat the Dynamo on the road, and I don't think it's going to happen. Considering Dynamo has always been very good at home and always have the better over the Quakes. But then the very next game, in case if they don't beat Seattle and Houston, and if they lose both of those games, this could also be the game that possibly could be the first point where the Quakes could get because they play against also another team that is almost right around the same spot that they are right now in terms of teams that are off to a terrible start, and that of course is Austin FC. I mean, I know points total. That's something that Austin fans will point out that hey, yeah, as bad as we've been playing, at least we've been getting points. But the thing about this game between them and the Quakes is Austin has never beaten the Quakes. Like the Quakes have never dropped points against Austin FC. So I'm really hoping that doesn't come to and in this one especially. With the way how Austin, out of those all the times where the Quakes play against Austin, this is probably the worst Austin team that they're going to be playing compared to all the time that they will get a resort, which means that probably that means that streak is going to come to an end because knowing the Quakes, they do the opposite thing. After that, they play at home against the Colorado Rapids, and while the Rapids have been playing much better, they have historically done well against the Rapids at home, and then they go on the road to play against the Galaxy in the second Cali Clasico out of three, and that's probably not going to be a win because the Galaxy look red hot right now and look like one of the best team in the Western Conference. Looking at New England, so the next matchup they have is against the Chicago Fire. So again, that might be a matchup that New England might have a chance to get all 3 points. I mean, yes, I know Chicago just got their first win and they got a much needed win, but let's be honest, that win was really just because of them being on the benefit of some chaotic situation, and also not to mention very questionable refereeing decision that kind of gone their way, and also a little bit of assist from the win as well. So you got to say that for New England, that has to be a chance for them to to get a win, and especially with the way that this is actually going to be the first week that they, of course, would have a week where they actually have a full week of rest. I mean, this team has been playing 3 games in 7 days for the past couple of weeks. It has to feel good for Caleb Porter team that finally they got a chance to get a rest and should be up for it in this game against Chicago. Now the next one they are staying at home and they're playing against Charlotte FC, and this is after when they played leg one against Club America on April 2nd, and that game is actually going to be at home. It was originally going to be on the road, but it's going to be at home. So yeah, fatigue is going to be a factor, but this is where if you're New England, you're playing you're just coming off a game at home and you're not really traveling anywhere and you're facing against a Charlotte team that they think Charlotte has been kind of like Austin in some way, and I know that's kind of disrespecting to Charlotte FC fans, but they haven't really been that good either, especially going forward. So you would expect them to get a resort in that one as well. But the next one they go on the road to play against NYCFC, and as much as I want to say that's a win too, because NYCFC hasn't got off to a good start, that's after when they play the second leg against Club America down at the Azteca. So yeah, that's probably going to be tough. We always see teams when they go back to Mexico and come back to league, they usually don't get wins or even get a point out of the game. So I don't think that's going to be a resort that they'll get a win. Then they of course play against Toronto FC on the road. Again, it's a winnable resort. No, Toronto obviously has got off to a surprising good start under John Herman. And then, of course, they return home to play against Inter Miami. That one is probably not going to be a win because Inter Miami is just kind of a world beater right now in the Eastern Conference, especially with the way that I will say that the only way I can see New England probably get a win in that game against Inter Miami, they can use the big occasion and the big crowd to their advantage. There's no doubt that there's going to be about 65,000 plus. That's going to be it for this game, and we've seen before when a stadium is filled up with 60,000 plus. Well, that I know it's a big occasion because all those fans in Boston gets to see Messi and friends, but it's also so good play advantage to the home team too because I know New England does get big crowd at times at Gillette Stadium. They do get 30,000 sometimes, but getting 60,000 is a different level. It feels like a big game. It feels like a playoff kind of game, and we saw it too last year too when Chicago played against Miami. Where yes, I know that was without Messi, But you saw how good the Fire played because it just felt like it was a playoff game for the Chicago Fire. It had that atmosphere of being a playoff game. It can really rejuvenate the home team. So maybe that could be something that New England could play in their favorite. But either way, in terms of looking at both of these teams, and also by the way, if you wonder why I'm wearing New England for this video, the reason why is I think they're going to be in a better shape for the rest of the season compared to the Quakes. The issue I have with the Quakes obviously is that one, they're following the narrative as we have seen in the past couple of years. When they make the playoffs, they have to finish dead last in the standings because it's a given. And also, not to mention, when you're basically owned by John Fisher and the ownership group continue to be cheap and still not clearly resolve the big issue with this team, which of course is finding that number 10 spot. I mean, they were going to do it with Carlos Vela, but unfortunately that's all off the table. I just don't see how that's going to things are going to change unless if this ownership group finally decided to make that big move to find that decent 10. Whereas for New England, they already have a decent 10. I mean, Carlos Gio, he's a guy that even as bad as New England has had, he is still performing at a pretty big rate. And not to mention, they are going to get some of their players that were out long term last season back. I mean, eventually they're going to get Dylan Barrero and Brendan Bye back into this team once they are back to become full stream, and also not to mention once they do eventually exit out in the Concacaf Champions Cup, which could most likely be the next round because I don't see how they can pull off a major upset by beating Club America in those two-legged affair. Consider Club America is definitely a juggernaut right now in Liga MX. You would expect them to start to ride the ship a little bit and get themselves back to decent form because I think this team has a lot of talent. It's just unfortunate that because of the way that there's been so many games and so many days, you can see the fatigue level that has got to this team, and also not to mention Caleb Porter refused to use some of his squad rotation. You can see how exhausted that this team has had. But once that fixture congestion is kind of over, and once they get back to league play and have more of a balanced schedule where they don't play 3 games in 7 days like almost every single week, this team should be get themselves back in the standing, should be in a better shape. I can't say that about the Quakes, so I think this is going to be another rough season for the Quakes, and just another reason why there's a lot of reason why a lot of the Quakes fans are getting tired of this team and want John Fisher to sell the team, and also why they're ranking in terms of one of the lowest in terms of attendance for the past couple of years. Because why is there any excitement about this team? There's really no excitement you can say about this team because of how flawed this roster is, and not to mention the ownership doesn't feel like they're showing any interest in terms of trying to change that and make some reinforcement to improve the team. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of this video, looking at both of these winless team to begin the season. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and also let me know in the comments below who do you think are the two teams that most likely will get the first points and probably going to be in a better shape as the season goes along, or even which team is going to be the two teams that could potentially still make it to the playoffs. I mean, when you start 0 and 4, I think they mentioned how there only been 2 teams in MLS history that start the season 0 and 4 and still made it to the playoffs. So while it's not really a good probability, it's still a chance that either of these teams that got off to a decent start or got off to a devastating start can still make it to the playoffs. I mean, last year we saw Sporting KC got off to that disastrous start to the season, and while they never got to 0 and 4, I mean, they were winless for the first 10 games and they still make it to the playoffs. So it can happen. There could be a turnaround that could still happen both of these teams, or which team probably is going to have that chance to have that turnaround. Let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.